I've always been motivated by being pissed off at something, frankly. I got on the board and I looked at the budget and I saw that we're spending $10,000 a year on this software and it just pissed me off. It was just like, why is this acceptable?
So when you're 90, oh wait, no, you go to Peter Attia. So when you're 100 and 110, when you're on your deathbed.
I'll be broke by then. David and I and the rest of the company, we make things. We're makers. We like to make new stuff. And sometimes what happens is that you come up with a direction or a strategy and you stick to it because you made the promise to yourself, but then you end up cheating yourself because you're stuck to something you said in the past that was true back then, but is no longer true. So I feel like we had to eventually be honest with ourselves again.
Is there a fantasy of not doing what you're doing?
Yeah. Was that too quick of a yes, by the way?
Yeah, very, very quick.
The industry that you and I are in, it would be insane to think about closing a business that does tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. But there's this tiny part of me that thinks it would be amazing just to close the business.
Dude, what's going on? What have you been doing today?
Well, I recorded a podcast earlier with someone else, which was good. I'm just kind of trying to wrap up, going on a little quick trip up to a renovation project I'm doing up north a bit. So I got every 6 weeks or so, I got to go up for a day or two to review current work on a project and then come back.
What's your usual day look like these days? Are you busy? Are you chill?
Been a little bit more chill, although I'm about to get busy. We're about to work on some new products, so that's kind of a fun thing. But it's been fairly chill this year so far, actually, I would say. I'm trying to take a little bit more advantage of free time during the day because I've got kids, and at night, like it's basically right after work, it's all family time, and the weekends are actually not that open either. So kind of during the day is sort of my open time. Of course, I've got to work too, but trying to watch that a little bit.
Yeah, I've found having kids actually is a great forcing function. Like you can't really work after 5. There's no more late nights or anything. And then if you stay up late working, you're screwed because your kids will wake you up at 6. Are you sleeping? Are your kids sleeping through now?
My kids sleep, yeah. They're 9 and 5, so they sleep through.
So nice.
I get to bed around 10 or so, and then I get up at 6:30, 7. It's kind of a great setup for me, actually. It works out well. But yeah, for a long time, sleep was not good.
You guys, a couple years ago, released Hey, which is a really awesome email client. And then you guys just launched Hey Calendar. I'm curious, why launch a calendar product? Was that born out of like, were you miserable and overscheduled and trying to come up with a solution, or what prompted that?
I'm never overscheduled because I don't schedule things. I don't have a lot of stuff on my calendar. I didn't really use a calendar very much before. I used sort of just the built-in Apple calendar, and then Fantastical was sort of the client that I used on top of that. But the main reason we built it was because we had some new ideas around calendaring that were sort of bugging me about old calendars, the way calendars had been built for many years, digital calendars. My wife has she set up this huge paper calendar in our kitchen for our whole family. It's better than any digital calendar I'd ever used. Kids could scribble on it. We could put stickers on it. Like we could look forward to things. It's like 10 days to Hawaii, and there's like a countdown on each day and all these things that you're like, why can't digital calendars do this? And why on digital calendars does like a doctor's appointment I'm dreading have to be the same as a birthday party I'm looking forward to? Like they're just these bullet points with times, and everything's treated like it's going to be a meeting. It's like, this is not how it should be. And so I looked at this paper calendar and I go, we can bring some of these ideas over to digital. And then also email and calendaring kind of just go together. They just do, is the number one request we've ever had for Hey. So it made sense to bring them together and to do it in our own way.
I haven't really played with it extensively, but I'm currently on Fantastical, so maybe I got to make the switch.
Fantastical is a great product. It really is. I used it for years. And if you just want a really nice client on top of like a standard calendar setup, it's a very, very good thing. If you want to explore like what calendars could possibly look like, if you were to kind of want to explore a different approach and not look at everything just as like dots or grid lines and everything being a grid, and you want to have more flexibility with your time. It's kind of a cool thing. Like Hey Calendar has literally a strip, like a film strip style view where time never stops. It's just like, it's this day and the day moves slowly across your screen and everything's vertical. And it's a really unique way to look at time that really does change the way you look at your day, because you see open spaces. We actually label the amount of open time you have, and not just like the number of events you have, but like you've got 4 hours between this thing or 2 hours between this thing, and here's nighttime, and you've got stars, and the next day comes in the screen. It's kind of a very interesting thing. So it's worth checking out.
You had a tweet the other day that I thought was really interesting. So you've, for anyone that doesn't know, you guys have built this huge software business over the last, 25 years?
25 years, yeah.
25, that's crazy. 25 years.
Well, 20 years in software. We've been around for 25 years, yeah.
And you guys were an agency before that, and then you launched Basecamp. So financially, you've been incredibly successful, built this huge business. I would assume that you have enough money that you don't need to keep working. You wrote a tweet about why you keep going and what drives you. Can you talk about that? Because it's not the usual thing that drives. You're not talking about, I want to buy the New York Mets, or I want to buy a new Gulfstream, or I want to give it all away. This is a very interesting way of thinking about it.
Yeah, I don't want any of those things. A Gulfstream would be cool. I'll admit that. That would actually be pretty interesting. I've always been motivated by being pissed off at something, frankly. I moved in this neighborhood a few years ago where I live today. I just got on the board of the HOA, like the Homeowners Association. We've been using the software to if a guest comes, they get like a parking pass kind of thing, because the streets are you need to have a pass to park, basically. It's just been like this miserable, crappy piece of software. It's fine in that it works, but it's just everything about it, you can tell like it was outsourced or no one cared. There's just so many things you look at that and go, there's just no way someone cared about this. Things are shoved into place. There's weird gaps. It's just like not carefully considered. It was bad enough, but it was fine. And then I got on the board and I looked at the budget and I saw that we're spending $10,000 a year on this software. And it just pissed me off. It was just like, why is this acceptable? It's just purely not acceptable. But of course, the HOA, no one knows what other software exists. They were probably sold this thing. Some guy came and sold them the thing. And they're like, sure, this looks good. We need something. Just this acceptance that mediocrity is worth 10 grand. It just pisses me off. And so I've always been motivated to just make much better versions of things and charge very, very fair prices for them. Like with Basecamp, for example, you cannot pay us more than $299 a month, period. You can have 9,000 employees. We cap the amount you can spend at $300. And for everyone else, it's $15 a user right now. And historically, it's been $99 unlimited users. So we've always kept our prices low. Hey's $100 a year. Yeah, it's more than free email, but you can't pay. If you're a business, you can't pay us that much more. I just don't like the idea of software being expensive.
Is that because you're a good guy, or is that because you and David don't want the hassle of administrating huge teams and dealing with enterprise and sales and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I'll take credit for maybe being a good guy, but that's not the main reason. There's some of the latter, which is we don't want to build an organization that would have to service an account that's paying us $65,000 a year and has 6,000 employees and account managers and customization and all that stuff. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to that we don't want to do. But I just don't think software needs to be expensive. I don't understand why it is, frankly. I understand why a handmade piece of wooden furniture is expensive because it took a lot of time and the materials, and you can't make many of them at once. I understand why a lot of other things are expensive that have really high-end materials and, again, can't be built at scale. But if you can build something at scale, typically price should be coming down at that level. Software is one of these things that you basically build once and you replicate 1 billion times for free. I don't know. It just always bugs me that something like that should be expensive. It just shouldn't be. So anyway, that's one of the things that drives us. But more than that, it's not just the price. It is the combination of, first of all, I just think software still, not software, but solutions are still an unsolved problem in so many different industries. There's so many bad pieces of software that people just put up with and accept. And I see it in my kids' school, the educational software our kids are forced to use. It's so bad. I'm sure I know some of it's free. Google gives stuff away for free and the Google stuff isn't bad, but the custom stuff that these school districts buy is so bad, so convoluted. And I've seen the budgets and it's so expensive. It just bothers me. So we want to put amazing stuff out in the world that is fairly priced and reasonably priced. And that drives me.
So I remember one time I came to you and I said, Jason, I'm doing this software company and I want to give you free shares in it. I wanted your advice. I just wanted to be able to call you. And I said, I'm going to give you, I think it was 3% of the company or something like that. I sent you the docs, the contracts, and you just said, I don't want to do a contract. I don't want to deal with that. Just tell me that if something goes well, you'll take care of me later. Obviously, I really appreciated that trust, but I thought it was really interesting that here's this thing, and who knows what that's worth, but let's say it's worth on paper $50,000 or something, and you just went, I don't like contracts. I don't want to do this. Fuck it. Right? That is one of the most fascinating things about you. You more than any other entrepreneur I know, you don't do stuff you don't want to do. And you've structured your life and your business in a way where you never have to do anything you don't want to do. I admire that in you so much. And I've taken a different approach where there are times where I do things I don't want to do. And I often think of you and go, man, I wish I had Jason's situation where I didn't know anyone, anything. I'm really curious. A, is that an accurate reflection? And B, where does that come from for you? Like what happened to you in your life that's important to you?
I value independence, basically. Independence for me means really like being truly independent, which is the ability to do what you want to do, how you want to do it, and not have to answer to anybody else or have to ask for permission or any of those things. And I think I just take that to not the extreme to be extreme, but like I really take advantage of independence. I'm financially independent at this point. So like I don't need 3% of your company. Like I kind of also don't want 3% of your company. I just want to help you because I like you. We're friends. Like I just want to help. I don't need the financial ties to it. I don't need the obligation to it. I don't like to mix things up that way. I've invested in your company and I've invested in other private companies, but I don't need to be given anything. If I'm going to get something back, I want to put something in, basically, is another side of that too. And I don't think advice, frankly, is that valuable to give up to trade for 3%. I mean, I appreciate that. It's very, very generous, but it almost doesn't feel like a fair deal to you. So I didn't want to be obligated in that way. Where does this come from? I don't know, other than you could trace it back to a million things, and I don't know if any of them are the reason. So I'm not going to go through the long list, but I just know that because I'm in this position where I can do what I want, and we built a business that allows us to do what we want, and we haven't taken outside money that prevents us from doing anything we want. We can stay in business as long as we want. We're profitable on purpose with high margins, so we can mess around and screw around and get things wrong, and it won't matter too much. I've just come to the conclusion that like I should take full advantage of that opportunity, that rare opportunity to truly say no to things that would seem to be obvious yeses, but that I just feel in my gut I just don't want to deal with. And you could say I've made mistakes around this. I remember, I don't think of things as mistakes, frankly, by the way, but I could see other people saying this. So for example, I was offered the opportunity to invest $100,000 into Airbnb when Airbnb was running out of their apartment originally. I think they had like 8 people. I don't know what that would be worth today. I mean, I have no idea. But I didn't do it at the time because like I didn't want to go, I don't want to go through the process of the paperwork, and also like they at the time they weren't profitable, and for me it was important to invest in profitable businesses, and of course they were tiny, and who knew what they were going to be. But I mean, looking back now, you can see. But I didn't do that. I was just catching up with Owen from Intercom. There was a moment in time when they'd offered me 1% for advice as well. And I'm like, I didn't do the paperwork, I didn't. So like, I mean, it's cost me money in a sense, but it doesn't, I don't really look at it that way.
But it's cost you, it's paid you insanity. I mean, I was going to ask you, so you externally looking at you, and I know you as a friend, I talk to you a couple times a year. Externally, I always go, Jason's got it all figured out. He doesn't do anything he doesn't want to do. Obviously you do. What are those areas where you still get frustrated, or you still have obligation, or you get pulled down rabbit trails, you say yes to things? Like where do you have work to do?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have it all together. I'd say with work, we have it pretty together, but there's things I don't know how to do. Like we've grown our business to a certain level. I don't really know how to grow it beyond that. I don't need to grow it beyond that, but I really don't know how also. And so that can be a little bit frustrating from time to time. We've tried a bunch of things that we have never been able to crack the nut on, like marketing specifically, not like the way David and I talk about the product we're in the company, we're good at that, but to like deliberately set out to say, we're going to spend $5 million and make this worth it. We just can't figure out how to do that. I don't know how to do that. We've hired a few people, we're exploring things, but there's some stuff that, by the way, it doesn't really frustrate me because we don't need to do that, but I wish I knew how to do that, and I don't. So, but I don't look at that as like self-improvement I need to worry about. It's just like also I've gotten much better at acceptance. Just like, I don't know how to grow a business beyond the business I've grown. And if I was a CEO of another business, I don't think I'd be very good at it. I think that I was uniquely suited to do what I'm doing right now and built something that works for me, but I don't think I'd fit in pretty much anywhere else. So just accepting the fact that like, I'm not some great CEO. I'm just the guy who knows how to run this business. Like, I fit into this suit. I don't fit into some other suit. I fit into this one really well. It's tailored for me and it works. I'm okay with that. So I don't know. I tend not to worry too much about like what we're supposed to be or how we could be. Like people will often tell me like, you guys have left so much money on the table and you guys could be so much bigger. And I'm like, yeah, probably right. I don't really care though. It'd be interesting to know how to do that, but I don't really care to do that. And maybe that's just because we've gotten very lucky and we don't have to care. And I'm perfectly okay with that outcome too. So I don't know. But in terms of like life, for example, I'm a parent, I'm a father. There's things I need to get better at there, especially around acceptance with kids. I often like want my kids to do certain things or be a certain way, and they're not that way. And that's been something I've really had to work on. So I feel like most of the work I have to do right now is on the personal side of life and not professional.
So often, yeah. I was just an hour and a half late to drop my kid off at school, and then I dropped him off, and then I got a call 5 minutes later from the office, and they said his entire class is on a field trip. And so I spent the entire morning shuttling him off and buying him a bathing suit for this field trip last minute. So I feel you on that. It's interesting, like, if you look at different types of businesses, you mentioned craftsmanship. There's someone like the great sushi chef Jiro from Jiro Dreams of Sushi, where he's got like 2 locations. It's him and his son. They're the only trusted people. They charge the maximum price and they do the best possible job. And then on the flip side, there's Chipotle and Steve L's, right? And you guys are really interesting because you've had incredible financial success, but you have gone more on the Jiro side. Would you be okay to just say, my business will never do more than this in revenue or expand? Or how do you guys think about that? Like, at what point would you pass the reins to a CEO or focus on one area of the company or whatever? Like, is this a relay race or is this a life race or what is it?
It's a good question. David and I've been thinking more about that. This is our 25th year in business, so it's a long time. Naturally, we don't have another 25 years in us to do this. I don't think that wouldn't make sense. I don't want to be 75 doing this. It just doesn't make sense. So there's a few things in there. Let's first start with the Jiro or Chipotle comparison. We're definitely more on the Jiro side, although we're making more products. So we are essentially opening more stores in a way. I see each product that we make as a bet on an idea, and some hit and some don't. We hit huge on Basecamp. We hit pretty big on High Rise. We've had some smaller hits and we have some things that have not been hits. And we have some more at bats for sure. We have more ideas we want to do. And I want to actually be a bit more ambitious over the next few years. So we're actually going to be working on multiple products at once, which is something we've never done before. Not once.com, which is a different thing, but like simultaneously. So we're starting to work on 2 products, which we're going to build simultaneously and hopefully release on the exact same day. And this is a really hard thing to do, and we're going to do that. So we're interested in that. We think both of them are going to be hits. And so I don't want to wait to do one and then do the other. We're going to do them together. So will we grow our business beyond where it is? I'm sure we can, and I think we will. But it's not like there's a number or a target. It's more like, let's just keep doing interesting things and see where the chips fall and see how things go. If we grow more, if we grow 10% or 20% or 30%, great. If we stagnate for a few years, that's fine too. I'm comfortable with that. We've actually been fairly flat for a little bit here. Totally fine with that. But so we don't pick on new things to hit numbers. We pick on new things because we have ideas and we want to see new things in the world. And we also want to use those things. So we don't build things for others. We build things for ourselves, and then other people use them. And then, of course, ultimately, we do build them for them after the first version's out. So I would say that all those things are true. I'm comfortable with where we are. If we can get bigger, great. But it's not because of some goal or some number. I don't believe in goals. As far as the handoff idea, I don't know, frankly. I've wondered about this. Actually, I was going to catch up with you. We can maybe just talk about it now. I know you've hired a bunch of CEOs to run a bunch of businesses. I have not done that. I don't know how to do that. I am afraid I wouldn't trust someone enough to do that. And I'm afraid that I would get in the way, actually. So I don't know if I'm capable, frankly.
It's really hard. I mean, you think about it as your business is like a child and a new CEO is like a foster parent. except that it's a foster parent that you watch. And some foster parents abuse your children. Some dress them in ways you would not like, or take them to, events you wouldn't want them going to and stuff. And some of them are wonderful. And it's really hard to predict what you're going to get when you do it the first time. I think what would drive you crazy, and what kind of drives me crazy a little bit, is, so we bought the AeroPress coffee maker company about 3 or 4 years ago. And I'm a designer like you. I love products and I love aesthetics and, well-made objects. We bought the company and we hired a wonderful CEO, and we had some high-level ideas about product innovation and all that kind of stuff. And now I'm seeing those products. So I'm getting, in 2 weeks, I'm getting a prototype, the second prototype of a new product we're going to release soon. I get it. I use it. I admire it, but it's kind of like I'm a consumer of it. I didn't have any responsibility for any of the design decisions. I can just say, like, great job, guys. And so it's a little bit like the difference between being the owner of a soccer team or the star player. And being the star player is really fucking cool, but it's also really stressful and hard on your body. And so it's a hard decision, and I bounce between the two. And I was going to say, it's so interesting watching you guys bounce around too, because I remember about 10 years ago, you guys announced that you were going from multiple products to focusing just on Basecamp. I think there's this natural kind of, when you're a creative person, you naturally expand and then you contract. And it's exciting to see you in this moment of expansion. But tell me, can you talk a little bit about that just for a minute? We touched on a bunch of different stuff here, but when you guys made that decision to just focus on Basecamp, what happened over those 10 years that caused you to start all these new products again?
So we went all in on Basecamp and either folded existing products in or spun them off, or just kind of kept them around but didn't sell them anymore. And so we were all in on Basecamp, changed the name of the company to Basecamp, built an extraordinarily good version of Basecamp, Basecamp 3, and then Basecamp 4, which is the current version, which is the best version we've ever had. And I'm really proud of it. But I found that working on one product, I thought I was going to love that. And we made it really, really, really good. And we keep making it better and better and better. But every once in a while, you have a new itch. I think we suppressed those itches for a while. I found that I just don't want to suppress. I don't feel good when I suppress. So like at our core, David and I and the rest of the company, we make things. We're makers. We like to make new stuff. I don't like to feel suppressed. We had these ideas. Let's do them. Let's build. Hey was the next thing we built after that. And it was just so much fun to build something new again, to bring new ideas to bear, to design in a new way. Like Hey looks very, very different than Basecamp. Everything about it's different. We were able to sort of stretch and flex our muscles again and like make something from scratch again. And that was wonderful. Even though we make new versions of Basecamp every handful of years, there's still this path from the previous version to the new version. There's still a commonality, even though like it's new, it's still the same product in a sense. Hey was brand new. Campfire, which is the new thing under Once, or even just the idea of the once.com pay for software once thing is a new thing. And these two new products are going to be new as well, with products we've never done before, new categories we've never explored before. So I feel like we had to eventually be honest with ourselves again. And sometimes what happens is that you come up with a direction or a strategy, and you stick to it because you made the promise to yourself or to the industry or whatever. But then you end up cheating yourself because you're stuck to something you said in the past that was true back then, but is no longer true. And so some people are afraid then at that point to like change their mind, because people see that as like some sort of weakness, or like, you said you'd never do this or whatever. It's like, I don't really care what I said. Like, for a long time we felt this way, and now we feel this way, and we're going to expand into this new feeling. So I found that to be not only like exciting, but liberating and healthy. And the company's in the best place it's ever been in because of that. We actually are able to attract really ambitious people who want to build stuff. Like, we're a place where you build things. This year, we're going to have 4 new products out. Like, it's very rare to join a company of our size where anything is released that's significant in a handful of years. And so, by doing this, we're going to attract even more and more people who are ambitious and interesting and up for the challenge. And I think that's going to reinvigorate us in a lot of other ways too. So I think ultimately, and it's a long answer and I kind of said it, but like, we just had to look ourselves in the mirror and be honest about us and forget about what we thought about us, but who are we now? And we are a company and a group that wants to make stuff. So here we are. Do you ever find yourself doing that, by the way? You stick to some principle that you put out there in the world and you feel like you must now support that principle till the end of time. It's like kind of frustrating.
Totally. Well, I always think about that Jeff Bezos quote, smart people change their minds, right? We face this with public market investors. Oh, well, you said you were going to focus on XYZ 2 years ago, and well, the world changed. AI came out. There's always shifting things, and I think that you have to be able to do that. It's been fascinating though, because so I about 10 years ago I delegated all the operations of all of our businesses to CEOs. And I'd find myself in the shower in the morning, which is often where I get ideas. And I'd be manic with excitement about some new entrepreneurial idea. And I told myself, no, you're an investor now. You don't do that anymore. And I kind of let that muscle fatigue. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, I said, fuck that. And I started starting companies again. And it's a little bit like lighting fires, right? So let's say that I've got like a nice bonfire that's very controlled and moderated or whatever, but then I go and I light a bunch of little fires. Well, now those are embers and people need to blow on them. And if they don't blow on them and pay attention to them, they can turn into forest fires. They can light a bunch of money on fire. They can be operational disasters. And I just think that there's this natural expansion and contraction, and it's hard to light new fires without also creating organizational complexity with all the old ones. And so that I think is the interesting challenge that you guys will probably have, because it's like you've got these steady state products like Basecamp and Hey, and those need monitoring and improvement. And then you've got all these new products. But if you want to keep the company small and intimate and enjoyable, that's probably the balance you have to strike. I mean, how has that worked for you guys so far with so many? I mean, you already have a lot of products given the scale of the company.
Yeah, we do. But we've done this before. I mean, I keep coming back to the fact that back in, 2012 or something, we had 5 products and we had like 15 people at the company. And so we know we can build this. So for example, with these new products we're building, 3 people are going to build each one. So 3-person teams from scratch to completion, and maybe 6 months or so, like maybe 6 to 8 months. We've perfected the ability to build new products quickly with small teams. And maybe we can do it faster, we'll see. But we don't need to hire a bunch of people. We don't need to change the company around. We have the teams that we need and we can move quickly. And we've figured out how to squeeze all the stuff out that doesn't matter. And we've just gotten really, 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 really efficient and good at this. If they take off, the one part of the business that would expand would be customer service. Because if we end up having 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100,000 customers on these products, like you have to service those customers and we need more people. That's an easier hire and we can expand that part of the business, but we don't really have to currently expand the product development side of the business. We have enough people. We're actually hiring a couple more programmers right now and maybe one more designer. But with that crew that we have, which is around 20 all in, essentially, we can maintain the existing products, continue to improve them, and keep churning out new stuff that we're really proud of. Every couple a year, maybe 2 or 3 a year. That's sort of the plan. So we'll see how it goes. At some point, maybe it breaks. I don't really know. I'm never someone who's going to anticipate that and worry too much about it until it happens. If it happens, then we'll find out. We can deal with it. But I don't want to hire in anticipation of need, because you just don't know. To your point about the fires and the embers, the other direction, you went with the forest fire side. The other direction is if no one's blowing on it, it can just go out. And so if no one's buying it or no one cares about it or just kind of is a dud, it can just, fade away too. I don't want to hire a bunch of people to deal with something that's going to fade away. So we'll see.
So my business partner, Chris, who you also know, he had one guy, his name was Ben, and he was our accounting clerk. And he oversaw, I think we had 15 companies, and they all had journal entries and accounting and all this work to do. And he would manage to punch it all into zero. And to be honest, it was probably chaos and, we got some numbers wrong. But one guy who I think he was like at the time, like a $65K salary, was doing all that accounting. And I was just on the phone with someone who worked for me, and they have a group of 3 companies, and they were saying, well, we need 4 people to manage all the accounting. And you're so right. Like, small teams of people are capable of doing these things if they're forced to. And I think the hard part about getting bigger and having more money is so often you say, okay, let's do it the right way. And the right way is often the wrong way.
You see small companies want to grow up in a sense. Now, of course, look, you're a public company now. Like, accounting is a different level of possible requirements and audits and the whole thing. But like for 20 years, David and I did the books, basically. And we had a family accountant, someone who my mom was friends with, grew up with, and is still friends with. She would do our books like part-time, right? Because our books are simple. All of our revenue is booked basically on credit cards. We get, it's a very simple business actually. And now we have someone who's running finance for us. But again, one person, that's all we need. And then we have an accounting firm we use who prepares our tax returns and sort of does some basic auditing and stuff. And we're all above board and everything's clean. But like, you could easily close your eyes and hire 4 or 5 people to do that. And in fact, we did have another person. We used to have a team of 2 doing the books. And we realized we just don't need 2, actually. One's plenty. Now, there's no redundancy there. Like if that guy quits or he gets hit by a bus or he goes on sabbatical or whatever, someone else will have to pick up the slack for a minute. But our books are not that complex to begin with, so we can deal with that. I think what's important is not creating complicated situations and systems that need to be serviced by dozens of people. I mean, I'll tell you, like, even in the personal world, my house in Chicago, I'm trying to sell my house in Chicago. When we built this house, I built it from scratch. We did a geothermal heating and cooling system, which sounded like the coolest fucking thing in the world. And it is actually incredibly cool. There's like a pit basically that goes down like 400 feet into the ground. And as long as you circulate basically antifreeze that deep, it gets to about 55 degrees. And so you're always heating the house from a baseline of 55 or cooling it from a baseline of 55. So you're not bringing in outside air that's 10 degrees in the winter and trying to heat it to 70. You're always starting at 55. So it's way more efficient. Okay. Let me tell you something though. This fucking system that we have is so complicated and so complex. I have like a $4,000 or $5,000 annual maintenance contract I have to buy to run this thing. I've got these guys coming quarterly to always fix this and fix that and replace this filter and that filter. And these are not just like mini filters I can just pop in myself, like slide the big rectangle filter. This is like a sophisticated liquid filter that needs to be, it's like, what have I done? I've created unnecessary complexity and now I can't get rid of it. And this is what happens in companies. Companies create this unnecessary complexity. They put people in place to deal with it. And then because it exists and you're so used to it now, you think you can't live without it. And then things get mired down and you just put up with it. It's like the mediocrity I was talking about before with software. It's the same thing in companies. Companies are products too. And they get mired in their own mediocrity and complexity. And then there's this learned helplessness, like, well, I don't know, we just need 9 people to do this. It's like, no, you need 1. But you can't see it anymore because you've lived with it the way it is for so long. And I think it's very important to avoid that at all costs. So we're probably the extreme example of that. We avoid any unnecessary complexity in our organization to the extreme level that we're probably overcompensating, but I'd rather be on that side than the other side.
So we were joking earlier about, you're not out there buying a baseball team and doing all these complicated things. And I remember maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I called you up and I'd sold a company and I was starting to make quite a bit of money. And I said, Jason, what do you do with your money? You talk about simplicity at work. I think you also have a very, very simple approach in your personal life. What do you do with your money? Like, how do you invest it?
Mostly in index funds. So I just kind of basically follow the US economy, for better or for worse, and some small international things and a few bonds and whatnot, but basically very simple situations. I do have a financial manager, which I'm sure you would rail against since the fees that you pay are tiny, but ultimately large. I found that was helpful for us because they also kind of help us run a bunch of other things that we're doing in our lives and manage a bunch of stuff for us that I was doing as well and found myself way too stretched, way too thin. So I kind of like someone having a big picture view of everything and keeping an eye on everything because I tend to not keep an eye on a bunch of stuff that's sort of in the shadows, but's important. So that's part of it. But fundamentally, my direction to them is keep this as simple as possible. And I'm not a big believer in beating the market. I don't really think you can over the long term. I don't think it's worth it for the most part. My risk is really tied up in my business. Like all my net worth, all my risk is tied up in my business essentially. So I've got enough risk there. I want to be as conservative as possible elsewhere. And my goal mainly is maintenance and to maintain what I've earned. To let it grow, respectfully, but I'm not out there aiming for home runs. The home run is the business side of things for me, and everything else should be base hits and bunts and very simple things.
And do you feel you have enough?
Oh yeah, I've more than enough. Yeah. Way
What
more
are you
than
going to
enough.
do? So let's say that let's say you launch another product and it makes you another $50 million or something. Is there anything, like, one of the things I've struggled with is I would say I have enough. I've had enough for quite a while now. In my brain, I was like building this machine where I would insert creativity and ideas, and then the machine, the business spits out money on the other side. And then I didn't know what to do with the money. There was no meaning, right? So before, like you, I like nice cars, I like nice houses. I wanted to upgrade parts of my life. I was obsessed with computers. All I was to be able to buy whatever new Apple hardware came out. And then I got all that. And I was like, okay, well, I only need one house and one car and, one computer. I didn't really know what to do with it. When you think about this byproduct of all your creativity in business, which is money, where's that byproduct going to go?
That's a great question. I mean, ideally, it's going to go to my kids, but I'm a little bit nervous about that, to be honest. I don't know. What I've been doing a little bit with my money lately is I found that I really love restoring old houses. I don't know how this found me, but it turns out that I really, really love doing it. And it turns out to be very expensive. But the way I look at it is I'm leaving this spot on earth where this building is on this piece of land better than I found it. The aim for me with these houses that I'm doing is to share them. So I'm building these, I'm restoring these, I'm returning them to the way they were. I'm doing it really, really, really well. I want to share these with friends. I want to give these experiences to others. I want people to be able to hang out there as long as they want, to go have a vacation there, whatever it is. So for me, part of the earning is to share but not directly with the cash, but with creating an experience. But again, that's not why I do it. It just is like you said, there's a byproduct here, which is, our business throws off a lot of money and it goes to me and David and our Bezos owns a slice and McKinsey, his ex-wife, owns a slice because that's how that works.
He pays every year he can get like the one small area of his yacht like refinished or something with the money he makes from you guys.
Yes.
Yeah, nice.
Well, basically, yeah. Yachts are expensive to maintain.
They are very.
I don't know. It collects. It works itself. One of the things that I do find to be, I'm conflicted about this. This is more of an art project concept. Speaking of the Giro thing, I'll give you a little bit of a side story. There used to be this great sushi restaurant in Chicago called Katsu. And it was run by Katsu, who's the Japanese fellow who owned it, and his wife and their daughter. And it was exceptionally good, one of the best in the world. And there's this tiny place in Chicago, kind of on the side of the street, a unassuming place. And quality was exceptional. He was there for about 25 years, I think. He was sort of apprenticing his daughter to become a sushi chef, and she became really good. And then he decided he wanted to retire. He thought about what to do with the restaurant. And for him, he decided ultimately to shut it down. He said, I'm going to shut this down. And he said to his daughter, he goes, I want you to, you need to find your own way. I've taught you everything I know. No one gave me a restaurant. I'm not going to give you one. But what I did give you was experience and skill and expertise. And I want you to go find your own way. I thought that was this incredibly beautiful thing to do, as like maybe harsh as it might sound. I don't think it was. I think it was an act of love, but also this idea of actually being able to end something, to be able to close it down. Most businesses do end up that way. They just close. Now, the industry that you and I are in, it would be insane to think about closing a business that does tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. You have to sell it because you have to achieve the value for all the stakeholders and the whole thing. But there's this tiny part of me that thinks it would be amazing just to close the business. The problem is that, I mean, there's a number of problems. We have employees and we have profit sharing, and we also have a liquidity event situation where people would make money if we sold the business. And that is still the path. Ultimately, I would assume at some point we'll sell the business. But the other thing is that we have customers who depend on us, and they've depended on us for years. And to shut the business down, it's different if you're a restaurant. No one has to come dine at your place tomorrow. They can dine elsewhere. But if people have relied on your software for years and years and years to run their business, shutting it down would be totally irresponsible. So I kind of envy this idea of like something ends and it's done. So the reason I'm talking about this is because ultimately there will probably, unless the company falls apart, will be a large windfall at the end of this whole thing whenever that happens. And I don't need it. I don't know what to do with it. It wouldn't change my life. And I do struggle to think about it. It's almost, I know some people are going to hear this and think it's fucking crazy, but I think that's a burden. That an extreme windfall is a burden, actually. Can't be for some, for sure. And I worry about it. I wouldn't know. Now you could say, just donate it, give it away. And I don't know, maybe that's what, I don't know what I do. But like, it's an interesting thing to contemplate, because it's obviously not something a lot of people have to deal with. And it's, kind of obviously a ridiculous, tiny problem to have in a sense, but it's a real thing when you have a business that's worth a lot of money. So
I remember I was working, when I was still running the agency, we're working with a very, very wealthy individual who is a major philanthropist and does a lot of work in like political lobbying and stuff like that in the United States. And we're talking probably one of the top 20 wealthiest people in the world. The morning that I met this person, there was a school shooting. And I remember that this person was so profoundly affected by it. More than a normal person would be, right? It was really horrible, but just couldn't get out of their head and kept talking about it. And I realized it was because they were working on lobbying for gun control in the United States. And the burden was that, you and I might hear about a school shooting and go, that's a terrible tragedy, and then move on with our day. We don't have the sense that, hey, we could go do something about that. When you have this huge pile of liquid capital, right? And it's not tied up in a company. It's just, you can do anything, and you've decided that you're going to do good with it. You suddenly notice that all of the problems in the world are on your shoulders, right? And it's been fascinating getting to know some of these people that have these large amounts of money, because not only is it a burden in terms of lifestyle and security and all those things, but also it's stressful, because now you can actually impact the world in some big way.
can I add one more thing to that, actually?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
There's a pattern too that I find to be something that it's kind of off-putting, although like I've kind of followed it in its footsteps a little tiny bit. But it seems like in this industry specifically, when you get some money, you end up being an investor. It just seems like that's what you do next. You just put money into things, and you make that money make more money, and it's like I wonder. Even though I've done this, but I've only invested in friends' companies. So like I'm not an investor basically, but I will help friends who are in business. I like that. So to me, I always see it more as like betting on someone and supporting someone who I know who's doing interesting things.
Well, imagine if every great writer became a publisher, right? That's kind of what it is, right? It's like, why, if you love writing, publishing is a different job. It doesn't involve the same skill set, right? Why would you do that?
Yeah, it's just, I think it's because, people end up with all this money, right? And you like feel like the next thing to do is to make it work. I kind of like the idea of letting it rest, actually, and not feeling this obligation to make everything work all the time, and not feeling like this 100 needs to turn into 200, which needs to turn into 300. Maybe it's going to turn into 1,000. Like it seems stressful to me too, to have that, have all these things, all these bets going on. I don't know. I can see it being exciting too. So it just, for me, it's a little bit of a struggle to understand where the happiness is in that. But that's, again, this is just me. I'm not judging anybody else. This is like the thing I struggle with sometimes when I think about these sorts of things.
You mentioned bringing people together. So spending money in this way where you're restoring these wonderful houses and then bringing people together. And I've actually observed the same thing. So I've spent my money on all sorts of different stupid things. And I've found the only thing that's brought me satisfaction is I bought an old lake house about 45 minutes away. I completely renovated it and made it beautiful. And now I just bring my kids and my friends up there. And it's like bait for great people, right? It's just like you all get together and hang out, and it's the most wonderful thing I've ever spent my money on. So it's interesting that you've come to that same conclusion. I know you're very into cars and you're very into watches, and you get obsessed with collecting different things and stuff. Is there any other things you've spent money on that have actually brought you happiness and real joy, or has it all been fleeting?
Material objects are fleeting. Even though like a house is a material object, I don't see it as a material object. I mean, technically it is, in a sense. You're buying a bunch of material organized in a certain way. For me, there's something magical about a great space or a great room or a great location that is far beyond a material object, even though it's made of materials. So there's something about spaces that really hit me. So other than that, I would say There's a few things. I would say there's a ceramicist who I really, really, really like, and I collect her work. Her name's Toshiko. And I do love her pieces, and they do bring me happiness and joy. But watches don't. I mean, for a minute they do. Like, and I've sold a bunch of my stuff. Cars, I enjoy cars, but they don't bring me happiness. I enjoy them, but it's not like I have to have that thing. I mean, if I had to sell them all tomorrow, it'd be fine. I wouldn't miss them for a second, you know? But there's certain spaces in this world, places that I would miss and that make me feel better when I'm there. And I know make other people feel better when they're there. And I think there's magic in architecture and location and sites and land and the way things are oriented in nature that really are special. So I'd say that's the only thing.
One thing I love about the Brits is they know when a TV show is over. So they'll have 2 seasons of a show. It'll be awesome. And then it's done.
The Office was a great example. The original Office.
The Office. Yeah. And then look at what they did in the States, right? They drag it on too long. It stops being funny. The Simpsons goes on for 30 years, probably 15 years too long. I love that idea. In that, is there a fantasy of not doing what you're doing? Like I was going to ask you, if you, let's say that happened, was
that too quick of a yes, by the way?
Yeah, very, very quick. And I feel you, right? I often will think about, let's say there's like some earthquake and my house burnt down and I had to rebuild it, or I was injured in a way where I couldn't do investing or entrepreneurship anymore. I often fantasize about what would that be. When you think about what are you drawn to, let's imagine you couldn't run Basecamp for some reason. What career or job or other thing are you drawn to? I
think I'm probably unemployable, first of all. And second of all, I would never start another business. I don't want to start a business. I'm fortunate that I started this business. I don't really think of it as a business. I think of it as building things, and it just happens to be a business. But like, I don't go to work being like, I'm running a business today. That part of the business doesn't interest me. To me, a business is a collection of people and a collection of decisions, and it makes things, and like we make money to fund it all, and that's all great. But the act of balancing money and dealing with all that stuff doesn't interest me. And I think if I did ever do something else, it'd probably just be me. So maybe there'd be a business there. I also hate the idea of like, well, I'll just be a consultant, because that's kind of what you also end up doing and just giving advice. I don't know. I struggle with it all.
Writer. You're a great writer though. Why not? Like I'm really enjoying, I wrote a book and I'm really finding there's a lot of satisfaction in doing something that doesn't involve other people. Right. And then you make a product that exists for 20 years.
Yes, that's true. So here's a couple of my fantasies here. First of all, the day I'm done with this, I will close my laptop and not open a computer for at least a year. Like, I don't like computers that much either. I don't like to look at a screen all day. That's sort of not that interesting to me. So I would like to not use a computer for a while. That would be nice. I'd like to learn a few things. So I'd like to, I really want to get into ceramics. So I'd like to learn how to be a potter and throw ceramics on a wheel, clay, I play with this a little bit, but I'd like to dedicate myself to doing it. And I want to do this like 8 hours a day, like a job, essentially. I want to have a job to learn a few things. I want to get really good at drums. Those 2 things, specifically ceramics and drums. And I also probably want to learn Spanish. Really, I want to be a really good Spanish speaker. Those are the 3 things I would do next. Beyond that, I don't know. I'll find out what that would be when the time comes. But I don't have like a grand plan. I've never had a grand plan. I don't have a grand plan now. I didn't have one 20 years ago. And I don't have one about the future, other than like there's a few things I want to learn. But I could do those things in a year, let's say, and if I dedicated myself to them, and then what, I don't know. I'll figure it out when I get there.
So I think you've constructed your life in a very interesting way where you have a lot of freedom. You have both financial security and also risk taking. What like existential stuff actually gives you anxiety, right? Like, outside of like your kids getting hurt or something like that, what do you think about? What do you dwell on? Because what I've found as I've, bulletproofed myself in a variety of different ways, I find myself just worrying about new things. What do you worry about?
I worry about my kids, the future they're going to inherit. I know they'll be able to handle it, but I worry about them. I've really, it's so trite to quote Steve Jobs, especially when it comes to this, but he just did say something that really hit me, which is like having kids is like having your heart walking around outside your body. I really totally identify with that. And I didn't for a while, and I do now. I really do now as my kids are growing up a bit here, 9 and 5. They're like, I feel like, gosh, in a few years, my 9-year-old like probably won't want to talk to me for a while because he'll be some angsty teenager, And my 5-year-old is at this place where I can still carry her around and still like have those really tender moments. And in a few years, I haven't picked up my son in many, many years now. He's 9. I just like don't pick him up anymore, right? And like he's big, my daughter I still pick up. When will I not pick her up anymore? So I think about this. I don't really worry about them as much as I think about them, and I'm concerned about them and the future they're going to have. So there's some of that. I would say that's probably the number one thing though that really is kind of on my mind is like their life and what life they're going to lead and how they're going to be in the world and that sort of thing. I also do worry about what we're doing to the planet. It really bugs me. I just am concerned about that. I love nature so much. It just hurts to see it go away in a lot of ways, in a lot of places, in a lot of styles, in a lot of different capacities. I see fewer insects than I did when I grew up. I see fewer birds than I did when I grew up. It bugs me. It scares me. But I don't feel like there's anything I can personally do about that. So that's one of the things where you really run into anxiety, right? Which is an issue that you can't really do anything about, but you worry about. Like, I feel like I can have some impact on the direction of my kids' lives in a good way. I want them to be independent, but I can kind of, help there in a sense. I don't feel like I can do much about the fact that there are fewer butterflies and fewer bees.
Let's say you took Basecamp public and suddenly you have $2 billion of stock sitting in the bank, or let's say that someone buys it, like, Ben from MailChimp sold, and I would have loved to see that wire transfer, right? They bought it for $6 billion or something like that. What does that feel like? Do you think you'd feel differently about climate change if you knew you were sitting on the cash to potentially impact it in some way?
No, because I don't think any amount of cash I could have would have anything. I think we are so in over our heads as a species. There's nothing I can do even with 10, 20, $50 billion really to really make any change. I'm just concerned about the path that we're on, but it is what it is at this point. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. Maybe, historically humans have always seemed to figure out some solution. I think the other thing I am worried about a bit is just sort of, just humanity, but more about like the personal connections people have. And I'm pretty introverted, so I'm not like Mr. Connections. I do feel like we're at some sort of tipping point here with AI on the horizon that's just really going to fundamentally change things in ways that I don't know if the future is going to be better or worse for the first time. Now, maybe that's just a matter of being 50 and that's how everyone feels when they're 50. Like, I don't know if maybe the past was better and it feels like something is different this time. Maybe everyone feels that way. I don't know. I'm a little concerned about it, but I'm also curious about it. But my big concern, I would say, is the existential side of it, to get back to your existential point, is that it seems to me that intelligence only likes room for itself. For example, if the dolphins became really, really, really intelligent tomorrow, we would wipe them out. Like, I just now, I don't know. That makes me nervous. Again, like,
maybe that's what your philanthropy should be focused on, is prematurely knocking out the dolphins so they can't get too smart. I think that's it
seems like humans are already doing that, but
I was going to say I struggle with this a lot too. There's a really good Robert Greene book called The Laws of Human Nature. Have you read that?
No, I've not.
You got to read it. It's amazing. He basically breaks out all of the kind of psychology, different pieces of psychology and different personality traits through stories. One of the final chapters is about generations and the pattern as people age and how they perceive the world. He has this great quote, and I'm going to mess it up, but it's like 200 BC. So what is that? 2,300 years ago, 2,200 years ago, or something like that. And it's this guy, and he says, "I fear this generation will be the last, for they are weak." And I'm about 40. I'm like, 10 years behind you or something. And I'm for the first time feeling alien to people who are 22. They speak different. They have different values. And I do have this sense of like, oh, there's this weakening of society, and, the kids are not all right, and AI and all these things are existential risks. I really wonder, like, is this us getting old and curmudgeonly, or is this actually a fundamental change? Because I'm sure if you talk to someone in 1960, they'd say, well, we're all going to get nuked by Russia and these damn hippie kids aren't going to be able to run the country. It's so fascinating. And I go back and forth every day.
I do too. And I want to avoid the tendency to think that the next generation can't do this or can't do that. And I want to meet these new things with curiosity. I truly, truly do. And so I don't know. We'll find out. And we're going to find out regardless.
So when you're 90, oh wait, no, you go to Peter Attia. So when you're 100 and 110, when you're on your deathbed,
I'll be broke by then.
If
I'm going, yeah.
Yeah, you'll be totally broke. You'll bought the Gulfstream, the jets,
Right.
trying to fill the hole in your heart.
Ruin the whole thing. Yeah.
What will be, in your opinion, a good life? Is it literally just, my kids launched, my kids are happy? Like what do you think that is?
I don't think I'm equipped to answer that question. Like, I don't know how I'll feel in 30, 40, 50, 60 years. Well, not 60 probably, but let's call it, I'm 50. Let's say I have 35 good years left to me. Let's say that's the life expectancy, about 85 or something. Let's just say I get to there and I'm healthy. I don't know how I'll feel. I didn't know I'm 50 now. I didn't know how I would have felt 35 years ago if I was to imagine how I'd feel now. So I tend not to ask the question or answer the question, because I don't ask it either, because I don't think it's even possible to answer. I'm sure upon reflection, if I close my eyes, I'll reflect on my family. Probably. Where are they now? What have they done? What's their life been? Some of that. I think that's what would probably appear. It will not be version 5 of Basecamp or that product I made that was amazing in 2025.
You finally relaunched the parking app for your HOA.
Probably not, but it could be. There could be a lot of fulfillment from that, and there has been and there is. But I think it'll be more human. I think your final thoughts are more human thoughts about fleshy, biological human things, and not about accomplishments and the only reason I don't know this, but the only reason I would guess this is because I've been around some very old folks who are at the end of their life, and that's what they think. And I don't think I'm any different than them.
So a couple things that I've been asking all the guests. So, and I asked you to think about this before. What are some things that you've been loving lately? So products, services, objects, anything. What do you want to recommend to the audience?
Yeah, so I like making espresso. Make myself an espresso every morning, and my wife a latte every morning. And I bought this espresso machine called the Decent Espresso Machine. It's called Decent, which is a great name for a product, by the way. I think it's wonderfully quirky, enthusiast-driven, bizarre espresso machine. It's by this crew in Hong Kong. It actually has an Android tablet on it. You can control all sorts of very unusual parameters around coffee that you could never control on a traditional espresso machine. You can simulate other machines, the way other machine pressure profiles work. It's fascinating and beautiful, and not beautiful to look at, but a beautiful concept that someone had in their mind and brought to the world. I love products that are built by enthusiasts that would only be built by enthusiasts. There is no way in hell this product would ever be made by La Marzocco or one of the other Breville or whatever. It's too weird, but it's lovely and great, and it's awesome. So I like the Decent Espresso machine. It makes a great espresso, by the way. It makes more than a decent espresso, but I love the under-delivering name. It's great. As I mentioned earlier, I want to learn how to play drums really well, and I just got a new set. I used to kind of mess around and stopped, and then I got a new set. And I just signed up for this thing called Drumeo, which is basically online drum lessons. I'm going to find a teacher eventually, but in the meantime, I want to kind of start learning. Drumeo is owned by a company. I forget what they're called, but they do like piano lessons and drum lessons, and I think guitar lessons, and it's exceptionally well done. It's like the amount of material they have on video and the way they've set up the lessons and the way it's all integrated is so well done. It's so fairly priced, and there's just this deep, deep well of learning materials that are all well produced. It's just a great thing. I'm kind of shocked by how good it is, frankly. So that's something I'd recommend, Drumeo. And if you're into other instruments, they make other things, so you should find out the company that makes it. The last thing I'll say, I will talk about a car. I recently bought an old car, a 1978 Porsche 928. Which is a really quirky car for those who know cars. It's a super weird design. It's kind of a design that was supposed to originally replace the Porsche 911, which is the most iconic car probably ever in a lot of ways, and never really achieved that. It's super weird. It's super cool. I love the way it looks. It's super unique and it's quirky. Again, I'm finding myself enjoying products that are just like, how did this make it to market kind of products? I love products that and the same thing is true about the Cybertruck, for example, like I don't own one, but like, I love that thing exists in the world. There is only one company that would ever dare to make something like that. I love that it's out there. I don't need to buy things to respect them and have deep admiration for them and to understand that the challenges of getting something out the door like that. That kind of stuff's remarkable. So the Porsche 928 was a car like that in its time. So the 1978 version is the first year. I always like to buy the first year of things. It's the purest version of something. It's the purest idea. So anyway, those are some of the products and things and services that I'm kind of into these days.
I love that. What's your daily driver?
I drive now I'm driving a Tesla Model S Plaid.
Yeah, that's same as me. I have the Model S. I just bought it. I'm amazed by the full self-driving. It's crazy.
That's pretty great.
It's really, really impressive. And they've done a really nice job with the interior too.
It's a nice car. It's really, really nice. The charging infrastructure, which people don't really recognize as being a huge advantage, everything just works. I've really been surprised. I had a Porsche Taycan before that. So it's the electric Porsche, which is twice as much money and not twice as much car. It's just not. So
it's wild. I have a BMW iX that I've been driving for the last 2 years, which is a beautiful car. I love it. And then I got the Model S because I was excited about all the full self-driving stuff. And going into the Model S and then getting back into the BMW, I'm just astounded by the European and American car companies and how many buttons are everywhere, how much unnecessary design there is. It's like, the little icon to show if your seatbelt's done up. It's like, why is it glowing? Like why can I choose ambient light colors? Why is there a scent diffuser and a massage chair? And why are there buttons to do all these things? And I felt like that was the best car on the market a couple years ago. Tesla has really upped their game. It's impressive.
What's interesting to me about that, I think this is a great little discussion here, is that the thing that blows me away about the Tesla is that it's so spare. And what I've found on the inside, which I found I really like, and it's spare. To me, that's like actually the higher form of luxury and I don't really care about the luxury side of it, but if I'm really talking about it, it's not all the bulbous stuff and the massagers and the diffuser and the whatever. It's like the spare interior. It's like focused on just this one screen, and well, actually there's two in the Model S, but it's so well integrated. The other thing that's interesting is like when I had the Taycan, I used Apple CarPlay, which is a good product. Tesla's information thing, just to me, in my opinion, destroys it. It's so good. The nav is so good. The integration with Spotify is so good. No other car manufacturer has even come close to getting anywhere close to coming close to making their own system that is competent.
Well, think about also it gets better every week. Every single week I park my car in the garage, I wake up and it'll be like, hey, we just added Audible. And by the way, the full self-driving is better and we improved the interface. Like my BMW, the interface hasn't changed in 2 or 3 years. I just don't know how anyone's going to keep up with them. Did you do the yoke or the steering wheel?
I did steering wheel.
Okay, I did the yoke and I'm kind of regretting it. That is one thing where I'm like, you know what? They dared to do it, but don't reinvent the wheel. There's a reason that's a saying.
Don't reinvent the wheel. I mean, you could probably swap that out, I'm guessing too, right?
Yeah, I'm going to. Okay, one last question. What about books? What books do you recommend? What have you been enjoying lately?
Well, I wish I had more time to read more books. It's been very hard for me to get into books. There's two, though, that I read recently that I really enjoyed. One was The Old Man and the Sea, which is the classic Hemingway book, which I really, really liked, primarily for the message. Have you read that book?
No, I haven't. And I'm surprised to hear you say that because I remember you telling me you didn't read fiction like 10 years ago. I've also gone down I love fiction. I'm the same way. I got some recommendations for you too.
Okay, I just switched into fiction. So so The Old Man and the Sea, it's basically a fable. You should read it because it's a classic. But basically the message is like, you might chase something. I mean, what I took away from it was like, the things you end up chasing and thinking you absolutely need will destroy you in the end. Like you'll get them, and then it'll destroy you. So Anyway, that's my takeaway on that book. And I just really enjoyed it. It's also very short, which I liked. And the other book I read, which blew me away recently, was called The Overstory.
Oh, this is my girlfriend read this about the forest and how it works.
Holy shit. Well, it's about 8 or 9 people, Americans in this case, doesn't have to be, but it was about 8 or 9 Americans. It's set in America who had different experiences with the trees over their lifetime, and how it ultimately all brought them together in ways they didn't realize to try to save the forest. But it is so beautifully written. First of all, it won the Pulitzer Prize, so it's not like I'm saying anything that's other people haven't said, but it shocked me in its beauty. The prose is so beautiful, and it's so descriptive and effortless. And when I read this book, I imagined the author just in a groove, like just sentences flowing out of his fingers, like, damn, that was good sentence. Like being proud of the writing. There's just this sense of like happiness and smiling and like cleverness, but not too clever. It's so well written. It makes me want to be a better writer, and it makes me really want to read more fiction, actually. So I'm going to put aside nonfiction. I get enough nonfiction through like podcasts and stuff like that, right? I want to get into fiction. So these 2 books have kind of, I think, pushed me in that direction. What about you?
I love that. Well, it's interesting. We were talking earlier about this idea of generations, and the best book I've read probably in the last 5 years. So I started reading fiction 4 years ago. I said I was really overwhelmed with work, and every book I read was about business or something to do with stressful stuff. And so what I did is I did like what they call like a dopamine detox. So I said no screens, no screen except my Kindle, no devices whatsoever, not even listening to music in my car or anything for a full 6 weeks. And so I took the summer off. I went up to my cabin and I just had my Kindle, and on it I had all these fiction books. And I read this book called Rabbit is Rich by John Updike. Have you heard of him?
I know him, but I don't know the book.
Super amazing writer. And he's a little, he's like your racist uncle who you really like, but he says a few things and you're like, well, we don't call them that
right,
anymore.
Yes.
But so it's a product of its time, but it's really fascinating because not only is it one of the most beautifully written books I've ever read, but it's about a man I think he's my age or your age. He's in his 40s or something. And it's just a little picture of his life in that moment. And it's this series where he wrote 4 books about this guy, this one character named Rabbit. And you see him as an 18-year-old, and then like a 30-year-old, and then like a 40-year-old. And then you see him when he's old. And this, I hadn't read all of them. I just heard that this was the one. This is the one that won the Pulitzer. It's always the one that is held up as the best book of the decade or whatever. And it was incredible because in the book, you see him fearing all the same things we fear. There's the oil crisis. There's lineups around the block for gas. His kid is saying, I'll never be able to afford a house. There's mass inflation, all these things. And it was really comforting reading that book and realizing these feelings that you and I are sharing here, these are not original feelings. Like our lives are just kind of a playlist that every man seems to go through. But in terms of writing, some of the most staggeringly beautiful writing, and it's a really long book, opposite to Hemingway. He's very effusive. He will spend 4 pages describing a building that he walks past. But trust me, I'm not into flowery bullshit, and this is like the most beautiful stuff I've ever read.
I'll have to check that out next.
So yeah. Rabbit is Rich by John Updike. Highly recommend. Well, dude, this was so fun.
Yes.
It went in lots of interesting directions. We talked about software design, the meaning of life, AI. We got a Steve Jobs quote in there. It was good.
Sorry about the Steve Jobs quote. I kind of...
No. I'm a big Steve Jobs fan. I'm just joking about how we can't resist.
I know. That quote especially. Yeah. But yeah, this is super fun. Great topics, went all over the place. I love that kind of conversation. So thanks for having me on.